1. So I've never been a religious person. Sure, I believe in something, and I think I believe in a god, but my beliefs are all over the place. I've always been a skeptical person. I don't believe anything without absolute proof. I've always believed that there's simple explanations to things, science-based explanations. But after my experience, I'm not so sure anymore. For as long as I can remember, I've always been able to sense negative energy. I feel like Long Island medium talking like this, so bear with me. Whenever something bad was about to happen, I would, and still do, have an overwhelming sense of dread come over me. Then it happens. Something goes wrong, even if it's something small like the power going out. As well as this overwhelming sense of dread, I had some really intense dreams as a kid. Demons chasing me, creatures hunting me down in a forest, people I love getting hurt, etc. Almost like torment and constantly waking up at 3 a.m. even to this day. Now that I'm somewhat older, there were some events leading up to what happened recently. The main encounter, and most impactful, was when I was about 9 or 10. I used to sleep with my door open. For some reason it made me feel safe. One night I was tossing and turning, and I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. In my doorway a black figure stood, maybe 6 feet tall. It was blurred out, with no distinct facial features. For some reason I felt safe. I was calm. I followed it around my house, and I watched it walk through my front door. And I went back to sleep. I'm not sure what it was, but I don't think it was a negative thing. Now this is where things get bad. I've had some friends over at my house. I've lived here for maybe 2 or 3 months now. It's about 2 to 5 acres. Beautiful land. We had stayed up playing Red Dead Redemption 2 all night, and decided to start a fire in the pit around 2 a.m. We were outside hanging out when I got a bad feeling. This was the worst feeling I've ever experienced. Almost like in horror films when the violins are struck. And it's that ear-piercing, hopeless sound that fills the air. I was horrified. I couldn't move. My friend stands up. "Dude, what the fuck is that?" "Where?" "Right fucking there!" I looked where my friend was pointing. I nearly passed out. In the brush around the trees, a pale, white, light green, thin figure stood hunched over. It was almost like it was examining us. It was too odd to be human. But it resembled one. It made moaning sounds and sounded disturbed. Then it started moving closer. It was fast, and it made tiny pats while it moved. We fucking took off so damn fast, and slammed the front door behind us. We spent the rest of the night watching YouTube with the lights on, trying to forget about it. The next morning I checked where it was, and there was some kind of trail leading into the forest. But it wasn't an animal. After some research, the only thing I can find is a creature called the Rake. It's some creepypasta BS, but it's the closest description. I don't know what it is, but I'm terrified. I hear noises all the time, and I don't know what to do. Please, if anyone has any ideas, let me know. Thank you. 2. I'm currently reading through all my old diaries, age 11 to 22, and came across the night in question. I was in the middle of an entry. For a split second, I didn't even know I was reading the same event that touched me so deeply. For context, when I was 12, my mom couldn't find a sitter for a late-night meeting, so I had to go with her, along with my younger brother, B, and a friend, Mac. We had to keep ourselves entertained, somehow, in a church at night. Naturally, there's a cemetery in the back we had to fool around in. My entry reads, "Me, Mac, and B went into the cemetery in the dark. I screamed and hid behind a gravestone to scare B. But B taught us a ritual that brings the spirits out. You stand on a gravestone and say, 'May rise' 10 times. I stood on about 6 stones at different times and did it. Then I was standing on one and Mac and B were facing me. Mac saw something walk towards us and then run. I saw a black something that was hunched over, going behind a tree. B saw what I saw. There we were up near the church more, and I was staring at the one that was right next to a tree. I stared at it for a long time, and it was shaking a lot and fast. His head moved so fast. Then it waved for me to go over there. I'm not crazy. Mac even saw it too. To clear things up, Mac saw something walk towards us and then run. I'm standing on a stone facing B, Mac, and the church, and a wooded area to the right of it, where I saw the something. Mac said she saw a tall robed person standing behind a stone in the back of the cemetery. While she was trying to make out what she was seeing, it appeared a few rows closer. She screams and pulls me off the grave. Falling on my stomach, I look up to see her and B running towards the church's spotlights, so I followed. I was computing what I thought was a hunched, robed person walking behind a tree within the woods next to the church. At the same time, they were absorbed in the figure behind me. Our descriptions of the two different things we saw were oddly similar, though theirs sounded tall, around 7 feet, and mine was short, around 5 feet. I also want to point out that I completely forgot about the part where we stood under the light and stared at one of them next to a tree. All three of us stood there in silence for at least 5 minutes. I remember watching its head rotating around its shoulders like a pinwheel. So fast it was blurry. Following this experience, I don't recall anything about it. Even my diary entry quickly moves on to another topic. It wasn't until a couple years later when I experienced a similar entity in a cemetery, while using a Ouija board with a friend. I felt a dreadful, familiar feeling, one that made me recall the night at the church. On the outside, my skin felt sweat, like I suddenly got the flu. But on the inside, I am a dark hollow carcass bound to the savageries of the universe. Anyway, just wanted to share this experience, especially since I found this old diary entry. 3. I worked for a cleaning company for a little over a year, and I am convinced that at least 2 buildings that I cleaned in the evenings were haunted. I very easily could have had evidence for a lot of this, but the phone I had during all of this boasted a battery life of about 20 minutes. I'm tearing up just thinking about how awful that was to deal with. And opening the camera almost always immediately killed it. Sometimes it worked, and when it did, I tried to capture evidence. But since the phone itself sucked, none of it is very quality. I also only occasionally had a coworker with me, but they each had their own experiences that I will include here. One building was a community activity center, and since these experiments were less terrifying and more unsettling than anything, I'll start here. I cleaned 2 areas, 2 bathrooms and 2 locker rooms. The locker rooms were down the end of a large dark hall. I could have easily turned lights on in this building every night to make things less creepy, but I wanted to save an extra 30 seconds since I'd be at this particular location, anywhere between 1 and 4 a.m. In the men's locker room in particular, I would get a feeling of uneasiness upon crossing the threshold. The room itself seemed safe, but while I was in there, the rooms around me began acting up. I would hear lockers opening and slamming shut in the women's room next door. There would be the distinct sound of someone sprinting up and down the hallway with heavy footsteps. One time I asked for a very specific sign for whatever was there to show itself. I requested that it open 7 lockers in the north side of the men's room. As I walked in, maybe 10 seconds after saying that, I caught the tail end of the motion of 7 lockers right in a row finishing swinging open. I started to cry a little because, I don't know, I didn't really need that at 2 a.m. alone with a dead cell phone. But before I shakily continued with my work, I said something along the lines of, "Hey, you're valid, this is your space too. Just let me do my work and I'll be on my way without bothering you." After that, I noticed a couple of things. Waiting at the doors where I entered, oftentimes, there would be a shadowy shape just sitting there. I don't know, waiting? One time I swear in my life it waved to me. I have a super poor quality Snapchat video of this, but it's not worth much since the quality is so bad. On these nights I felt a presence that seemed there, but in the distance, like it respected my space. Possibly the one I spoke to before. But I also noticed there were other feelings there. Some nights I would walk in feeling nauseous, and the closer I got to areas where my brain told me not to look, inside the gym where I'd hear footsteps, a dance room with mirrors where I'd seen a large figure, and even the bathrooms as a whole, I would feel a pressure on my head, so bad it would set off my tinnitus, and even trigger migraines sometimes. One night when I was feeling this pressure and negative energy, I was cleaning the sinks and mirrors, and underneath where my knees were, a cabinet door opened hard on my knee, then slammed shut a second later. The doors were zip-locked shut because little kids put gross stuff in there, so they shouldn't have opened. When I checked afterwards, the tie was still in place and holding the door shut. 2 co-workers of mine also had experiences there. My friend was cleaning one bathroom and I was using the other. While I was out of the room, she heard a sound like a hand running itself along the metal assist bars in the handicap accessible stalls. She also swears she heard footsteps in the bathroom, but no one else was in the building but us. My fiancé, who did not believe me about any of this, experienced the same cabinet thing I described earlier. Same bathroom, same cabinet, still tied shut. So my big question here, if this place is haunted or whatever, which I'm pretty sure it is, could it have something to do with the fact that it's pretty much across the street from a cemetery? Could that explain the different beings that I felt with distinct personalities? Do these sound like average, run-of-the-mill ghosts just haunting a building late at night? The second building I want to talk about is much worse. The feeling here was just dark. It stuck with me for hours, sometimes days after leaving, and I had anxiety attacks when I thought of having to be there. It was only twice a week, thank God, at the local USDA building. It's just a little place, maybe 15 desks total. Took at most 2 hours to clean, but they were the worst 2 hours of my life, every single week. It started out as kind of a gross feeling, like I was being watched. My shoulders were tense, accompanied by what almost felt like fingers on my back and neck. I felt sick, often walked away with a headache, that sort of thing. It got slowly worse over a while. I'd hear an odd clunk in another area of the building. Maybe a door would shut somewhere. Things I could explain away at the time. Things that had rational explanations but still left me feeling shaken. During the time, it wasn't horrible, but the little creepy things and noises had definitely picked up in frequency. By the way, I'd started seeing shadows that would dart out of rooms as soon as I'd look at them directly, which is to say the least unnerving. I sent a friend a Snapchat of the room in general, nothing spooky, just complaining about being at work. She replied telling me that I ever sent her another photo of that place she would block me. She's very into supernatural stuff and claims she has a ghost in her house that just kind of hangs around. I don't know, that just put me on edge. I must have pissed off whatever dwells there, that someone didn't want contact with it, because things got a lot worse after that, really fast. One night that I will never forget, I actually thought I might legitimately die there. The sick feeling was immediate upon opening the door, like the air was thick with it. By my supply closet door, in the dark since I hadn't turned on the light yet, it looked like a huge trash bag was lounging in the hall, blocking my path. I averted my eyes because I was already terrified and turned the light on. The shape was gone. Nothing could have cast the shadow in this virtually empty hallway. When I opened my closet door, it was hard to pull open, as though something was forcing it back shut. I gathered my supplies and walked away to begin my job and move on, and the door slammed shut. I kept cleaning, because I had to, otherwise I would have gotten the fuck out of there, and continuously felt a hot breath on my neck that I heard over the music blaring in my headphones. At one point I heard the rattle of a rattlesnake, but of course, after thoroughly investigating, I found no snake was in the building. I would have rather found a snake, though. Not gonna lie. The door slamming sounds happened several more times throughout the couple of hours I was there, and that was always jarring. However, it was somewhat easier to brush off and ignore after a minute, since I was so used to it by then. But when I was walking in front doors and other glass, I noticed in the reflection there was another behind me. That was actually my reflection. It moved a half a second slower than me and was placed several feet behind me. I even heard the footsteps and felt something there behind me, but I was too scared to look. Overall, it was just wrong. I avoided looking in most reflective surfaces after that until the day I quit. Later, when I was cleaning the bathrooms, I noticed a sink turning on without me being anywhere near it. Not a motion sensor, mind you, but a good old handle-turning sink. One that should under no circumstances turn itself on. The mirror was also dirty again, even though I had just cleaned it. It kind of looked like someone clawed at the mirror with soap on their fingers. Thankfully, the bathrooms were the last part of my night, and I rushed out and had a really nasty anxiety attack in the car. My previously mentioned friend also cleaned here sometimes. She also experienced the nasty feelings I was talking about, even down to the headaches. One night she didn't want to work alone there. It was so scary, guys, I'm telling you. I often couldn't go alone either, despite company rules. So she brought her boyfriend. When she was cleaning the bathroom, the same one with the faucet incident, she began feeling hot breath on her neck. Then she heard her boyfriend from the entrance of the bathroom ask, "You okay in there, babe?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm fine." Then her necklace, which is I think the Virgin Mary, and was blessed by a priest, got hot and she left the bathroom. Her boyfriend was sitting in another area of the building entirely, and had not spoken to her or left his spot. He couldn't have spoken to her at the bathroom doorway. I do have a picture of this entity, I think, but my phone was such junk I don't think it's worth much. But it gives me chills when I see it to this day. And just a fun, 100% factual story that happened toward the end when I tried confidence as a deterrence. The US Demon A, as my friend and I coined it, was really acting up and my anxiety was presenting as anger. I was listening to Fergie, and when the line came up, I shouted, "If you ain't got no money, take your broke ass home." And I shit you not, the room immediately felt clear and calm. And I didn't see the thing for a couple weeks. WTF? What I'm wondering is what the hell was that? I have never felt so scared, and the blessed necklace thing nauseates me every time I think about it. Please help me figure out what it was. Am I still in any danger of that following me around, since I interacted with it and took photos of it? I just want some thoughts. I quit a month ago, and still feel uneasy when I even think about just driving past this building. 4. I joined my school's scout camp event sometime in 2006. The camp was hosted in a park built next to a forest, and the place was ran by a group of locals. In the second evening, due to heavy rain, some of the participants, including me, got a little sick with cold and were allowed to spend the night in a small and comfortable room used by the management staff to sleep, located inside a small office building. I was glad to leave my smelly and crowded tent, and happy at the thought of spending the night in a proper and warm room. A few girls were already there when I arrived. The early birds had taken up the space on the couch, so the rest shared and laid down our sleeping bags on the floor. I was ready to doze off in my sleeping bag after some time, when suddenly I felt an urge to cry. I had no reason to cry whatsoever, but I had a weird feeling of sadness engulfing me, as though someone I loved dearly just passed away. The air was warm and very quiet around me, and I couldn't stop the tears and just sat there sobbing silently. I didn't feel like it was my own emotion. The others around me were still and quiet. I noticed a friend next to me was awake, and I turned to her for a small chat after the tears had dried up. We talked for a few minutes about the camp and complained about the heavy rain. It didn't occur to me to tell her about the weird thing that happened just now. Instead, she asked me if I felt anything odd about the room. Turned out she felt the same wave of emotion and cried as well. Another girl sitting down in the corner saw that I was awake, and I beckoned her to join in. She was already in the room when I came in, and guess what? She felt the same thing, cried, and felt depressed for no particular reason. The next morning I asked around about the place, but it seemed like we were the first and only people to have experienced this so far. The building itself had no weird history of hauntings. Most of the rumors and stories that I had heard of come from the open camping site instead, or the forest nearby. What do you think happened in that room? Was there probably a spirit with us who just happened to be crossing the place and radiated its presence in the room? Or maybe there was a gas leak or any other possible explanation for this experience. I didn't think too much of the event until recently, and thought maybe it's a good idea to share and get your opinions about it. 5. So I feel like the first thing I should mention is that several years ago I started collecting antique photographs. I have hundreds of them. They date from the 1880s up to probably the 1970s. I have the majority of these photos in a trunk, while a few of my favorites are on display in my room. Sometimes I buy them in lots off eBay and such, though I mostly find them in antique shops. Some photos I'll get certain vibes from or feel drawn to, while others I just think are neat or funny. I don't claim to be psychic or anything like that, but I have had multiple paranormal experiences and have always been sensitive to those types of things. About a year and a half ago, I redid my bedroom, and had to move a lot of stuff, trunk included, into different places. It is currently in the closet in a spare bedroom, underneath a lot of storage boxes. I haven't touched it since I first moved in, and honestly haven't thought about it much either until about 6 weeks ago. I'm home alone a lot of the time, and one day while sitting in the living room, I caught a faint whiff of men's aftershave, kind of like the original Old Spice. I was alone at the time, and even if I wasn't, the only people who live in this house are me, a female, and my mother. Neither of us wear aftershave. There isn't even a bottle of it in the house. It struck me as sort of strange, but I really didn't think anything of it. A phantom smell, I figured, until it started happening more often. Always when I was alone. It comes and goes in varying strengths. Sometimes it's like someone is holding an open bottle of it right under my nose, so strong that it makes my eyes water, while other times it's so faint that I'm not even sure I really smelled it. It never lingers either. It can be overwhelmingly strong, and then, just like that, it's gone. Nothing. After a week or so of this, I started getting this nagging feeling that I needed to go through the trunk of photos. It was the first time I thought about it since I jammed my toe on it months ago while trying to dig something out of the closet. So it's kind of strange. Every time I catch that scent, it's like a flash in my mind of, you need to go through those pictures. No one else had ever been around when that smell would hit, and it had always been at home. But a couple weeks ago I was at work unboxing a shipment. I work in the stockroom at a retail clothing store, and the smell was there. And it was the strongest I had experienced it. I asked the other girl I was working with if there was any cologne in any of the shipping boxes, hoping that I could pass it off to myself as one of the bottles busting during transport. She told me there wasn't. I called her over to where I was standing to see if she noticed it. She did. And then, just as it always does, it vanished. My coworker kinda shrugged it off with a, that's weird, and went back to her job. It was honestly pretty relieving to me in a way, but it was also a little freaky knowing that whatever it is following me half an hour away from my house and hanging around me at work. It's been weeks since I've had that pull to open the trunk and go through the pictures. For some reason I just don't want to. I don't know what the deal is. Am I supposed to go through all the photos and then just see one and it all clicks? Would I know right where the right one is and be able to locate it immediately? What if nothing happens? And then what if something does happen? Then what? I'd have a face to put with the smell, sure, but would that change anything? I'm just not sure what I should be doing. Obviously, it wants me to look through the trunk, but I'm not sure that's the best idea. Has anyone else ever experienced anything similar to this? Would it be stupid for me to follow the feeling and try to find out what it wants? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 113. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Okay, I don't do this often, but I'm going to give my Patreon a little bit of a plug. If you'd like to support the channel, you can head on over to Patreon. I will be getting soon, probably next year at the latest, but soon, uploading audio only of the videos for those who want it. I'm just waiting for people to tell me which series they'd like me to start with, so that you can download it and put it on your phones. I currently have about 51. Ideally, I'd need, let me see, I'd need about 12 to 1500 people supporting me at $1 a month. So we can look into different tiers and different things, but basically I'd like it to just be if people supported for $1, they'd get access to any bonuses I happen to put up there, and it would certainly keep the channel going if any unpleasantness happens. I'm sure you all know the unpleasantness I'm talking about. But please don't feel obligated to do so. I just don't talk about it much, so people are always surprised when they find out I have one. So I'm going to give it a little bit more of a push from now on. Not constantly, just a bit more often. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.